Hey everyone, welcome to Tomb of 3D Printed Horrors. Today we're going to look at how to paint your cavern tiles. To do this, you're going to prime it with a gray spray primer flat and we're going to use two colors of acrylic paint. The first is Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel, although any medium brown will do just fine in this case. The second is going to be Ash by Folk Art, and this is just kind of a dark gray. It's got a little bit of a greenish tinge to it. And again, you could use any gray acrylic you want for this color. It just has to be different than the spray primer gray that you used. You want to have two tones of gray in this. So I'm going to start off with the Territorial Beige. I'm going to mix in a little bit of the Ash just to tone it down. The Territorial Beige was just a little too bright for my taste. You could apply it straight and it'll look fine, but I'm just going to tone it down with that gray just a tad. And again, if you used a different brown, it would probably be okay out of the bottle just fine. So I'm just going to start brushing this in randomly. What you're going to want to end up with is all three colors showing when you're done. So the original spray primer and then the two colors you're adding here in this stage. And just kind of a mottled camouflage effect. So there's really no right or wrong. I'm just dabbing it in. I'm going to mix in a little bit more of the ash, tone this down some more. You can do anything you want at this stage. There's no right or wrong to it. I tend to like a little bit more muted colors. That's why I'm mixing in the gray to the Territorial Beige. Now you're just going to splotch this in. Remember to leave plenty of room to add ash in and still have your the primer showing too, so you have all three colors showing in the finished piece. So I'm going to speed this up here and get this part done. Okay, we're going to call that done for the Territorial Beige, start adding in some ash. Now, I probably went a little bit overboard with the Territorial Beige, but it's no big deal. I'm going to start putting the ash in various places. You can keep it away from the Territorial Beige. You can have it adjacent to it. If the Territorial Beige is still wet, you can even blend it in and create a feathered effect. Anything you want to do here is going to look fine, because the next step after this is what's going to tie it all in together. I know this is looking pretty ugly at this stage, but stick with me here. It's going to look good when we're done. So again, just keep putting the territory or the ash in, and in a lot of places kind of feathering it in with the Territorial Beige and just kind of making an intermediary color. So again, no right or wrong. Just make sure you're leaving some of the original gray showing too. And I think that's going to do it for this piece. Alright, to get started with the next phase, we are going to use a color called Butter Pecan by Folk Art. It's kind of a nice, very muted, kind of a medium beige color. I really like it for doing caverns, so I do tend to, where pretty much everything else I'll substitute whatever they have at the store I'm at the time. This one I really do like for tying everything in. What we're going to do, I wouldn't call it a dry brush, but it's not a wet brush either. And what you want to do, and if you aren't sure, apply it as more of a dry brush, because then you can go back and add a subsequent coat and get it, closer, but you can't take paint off if you put too much on. But you can see here, I'm scrubbing it in. This isn't being done like a normal dry brush. The brush is a little wetter. It's got a little more paint than you would have on a dry, standard dry brush technique. And I really want this Butter Pecan to become the dominant color on the piece. The two grays and the Territorial Beige are going to be more of a base coat and a filler coat for down in the crevices. You don't want the Butter Pecan to get down into those crevices and the little creases between the rocks. You just want it on the top surfaces. So it's definitely more of a dry brush than a standard painting technique, but it's a little wetter than what you would probably be used to for most dry brushing techniques. So again, I'm not even using the paper towel here. I'm just scrubbing the paint off onto the styrofoam plate to get the excess off. So that's going to give you kind of an idea of how wet this thing actually is. And I'm just going to speed this up a little bit. You get the idea. Okay, so that about wraps that up for that the butter pecan, the wet dry brush. Now we're going to use the same color, the butter pecan, to pick out all of the stalactites and stalagmites on the piece. And you're just going to paint these the solid color, no shading, no dry brushing or anything. You want this pretty wet. And I'm just going to go through. I'm going to start with the stalactites here. And I think I'm going to go ahead and just speed this up. You get the general idea, but I'm going to paint the stalactites and stalagmites, and then we'll get to the final step for painting this piece. Alright, now with that done, we're going to do the final stage, which is just a standard dry brush. And for this, I'm just going to use, it's just an off-white color, parchment white, and you can make this yourself. You don't need to go buy a special color. Just take your standard white and mix it 2 parts white, or 3 parts white probably to 1 part of the butter pecan, and you'll get something just like this. This is just an antique white, parchment white. You just don't want the stark straight white. And I'm primarily going to dry brush this fairly heavily on the stalactites and the stalagmites. And for the stalactites at the top, brush left to right or right to left. Don't brush up and down. That way it's not picking up the layers of the print process. But this is just the highlight. Since you used the full butter pecan for these the stalactites and stalagmites, this will just highlight them. And then you're going to take it and just exceedingly sparingly, you're going to hit a few of the high points of the rocks with this as well. Just a straight dry brush, very, very light. You're just wanting to hit some edges. You do not want to lighten this overall piece and drown out the butter pecan that you did in the previous step. Then it's not going to look nearly as good. So again, I'm just skipping around, hitting a few high points, a few of the edges, and just picking those out so they get highlighted with this. Just going to speed this up, and this will finish the piece off. Thank you for checking us out on Tomb of 3D Printed Horrors. Please click that subscribe button in your bottom right hand corner.